All right, today we're going to dive into a TV show that did so much more than just entertain a nation. I mean, this thing captured its soul, right, at a major turning point. We're talking about the classic 2000 Japanese rom-com Yamato Nadeshiko. And yeah, that quote you're seeing, it just sums up the whole thing perfectly. I mean, make no mistake, this is not just a love story. It is a ruthless, hilarious, and surprisingly deep look at what happens when money, identity, and the search for something real all collide in a world that's, well, obsessed with what's on the surface. Okay, so at the very heart of this story, you've got this incredible clash of worlds. On one side, Jinno Sakurako. She's a flight attendant, and her life's mission, her only mission, is to marry a super rich guy. And then on the other side, you've got Nakahara Osuke. This guy is a legit Harvard-educated math genius who walked away from it all to run his family's little fish shop. So yeah, it's a total showdown between calculated market value and, real, quiet, intrinsic worth. All right, section 1. So how exactly does our protagonist, Sakurako, hunt for a rich husband? Well, her method is less about candlelit dinners and more like a brutally efficient financial audit. Let's get into it. Her secret weapon was this really common social thing in Japan called a Goukon. Think of it like a group blind date. But for Sakurako, oh no, this was not about meeting people. It was her battlefield, her stock market trading floor. It was a marketplace where she could size up potential assets really, really fast. And her strategy was just pure comedic gold, but it was also so telling. She had this lightning-fast mental checklist. Her eyes would just scan the room for these very specific signals of wealth. A flash of a Rolex on a wrist? Check. That little horse racing lapel pin? Oh yeah, check. The luxury car keys just casually left on the table? Double check. It was basically capitalism masquerading as courtship, and it was absolutely hilarious to watch. But okay, to really understand why millions of people were so obsessed with this character, who is, let's be honest, pretty cynical and materialistic, we gotta zoom out. We need to look at what was actually happening in Japan back in the year 2000. Because her personal anxiety, it was basically a mirror of the whole country's anxiety. See, for decades after the war, Japan's whole identity was built around this idea of a stable, one big, happy middle-class society. This car ad slogan from the 60s just nails that feeling. The neighbor's car looks small. The goal wasn't to be a billionaire. It was just to have a little bit more than the guy next door. Everything felt comfortable, predictable. But then, the 1980s happened, the famous bubble economy, a time of just wild speculation and over-the-top lifestyles. And when that bubble inevitably burst in the early 90s, Japan was thrown into what everyone now calls the lost decade. The whole economic engine just sputtered and stalled, and that promise of security for life, it started to look really, really shaky. And all that fear created this new buzzword that was suddenly everywhere, Karyu Shakai, which literally means lower-class society. That old dream of everyone being middle class, it was gone, replaced by this gnawing anxiety that you could actually fall down the economic ladder. And that, right there, is the key to Sakurako. Her desperation to marry rich, it wasn't just simple greed, it was a deep, big terror of falling. Okay, now this is where the show gets really clever. The title itself, Yamato Nadeshiko, is a brilliant piece of irony. It takes one of Japan's most treasured cultural ideas and just flips it completely on its head. So, what is a Yamato Nadeshiko? Well, it's the name for the traditional, idealized Japanese woman. Graceful, modest, super loyal, and totally devoted to her family above everything else. It's kind of like the ultimate perfect woman ideal. And this is what the show does so well. It just tears this idea apart. Sakurako plays the part of the perfect woman, the Yamato Nadeshiko, flawlessly on the outside. But what's really going on inside? Her main virtue isn't self-sacrifice for her family. Nope, it's strategic self-preservation to escape the poverty she grew up with. Her social role isn't managing a home, it's navigating the Goukon marketplace. And her inner strength? It comes from surviving the trauma of having nothing as a kid. And that brings us right to the core conflict of the show. And really, it's less about which guys she's going to end up with and more about a huge question that, frankly, the entire country was asking itself. And that question is, what does it actually mean to be rich? Is it just about the number in your bank account, or is it something else? A richness of character, of community, of spirit. Sakurako's choice is basically the living, breathing version of this question. On one side, there's the rich doctor, Higashi Hijujo. He checks all her boxes. He fits the algorithm perfectly. And he's totally in love with that perfect mask she wears. But he has zero clue who she really is. And then there's Asuka, the poor fishmonger who looks right past the Chanel and sees the real, terrified, but incredibly determined person underneath. And the show gives us this perfect symbol for that other kind of richness, the fish shop. Uwaharu. It's basically a character in its own right. It's the ultimate anti-brand. It stands for community, honesty, and this idea of honest poverty. It's the complete opposite of the superficial luxury world Sakurako is chasing. So you gotta understand, the success of this show wasn't just about good ratings. This thing was a cultural moment. It was a landmark that perfectly captured the feeling of the time. And by doing that, it basically closed the book on an entire era of Japanese TV. And I mean, just get a load of this number. An average viewership of 26.1%. That is massive. That means it wasn't just a popular show, it was a national event. The whole country was tuning in every single week to watch this one woman, flaws and all, try to figure it all out. You'll often hear critics call it the last trendy drama. And what they mean is that it was this perfect bridge between two different times. It still had all the glamour and high fashion from the bubble era shows, but it brought in this new emotional depth, this realism that would become the signature of the dramas in the 2000s. It literally closed one chapter and opened the next. And that leaves us with a question that feels more relevant today than ever. In our world of social media and perfectly curated lives, aren't we all running some version of Sakurako's algorithm? Constantly checking for the signals, chasing an image of success, all just hoping it'll make us feel secure? It's a tough question, but I have a feeling that Fishmonger from the year 2000 would have a pretty good idea what the answer is.